saying press that pause button. What the fridge is this? You're telling me that 3D is how stories are meant to be seen? I can barely even see the story with these stupid things on. I mean, what the fridge are you talking about? It's just like being there? Dude, trust me. If I feel like I'm in the movie, then I highly doubt it's because of the additional dimension. In the recent years of cinema, we have witnessed 3D technology making a comeback in theaters and even playing a big role in certain movies in order to make their mark in history. However, as time would move on, the interest for 3D in theaters quickly faded out from the public. So much so that even the film industry is starting to take notice and give less priority to it, to the point that now we're all watching the clock ticking till its inevitable doom. What was meant to enhance the movie-going experience by literally adding a new dimension to films ended up becoming exposed for its true intentions, being that it's nothing more but a novelty that gives an excuse for theaters to charge extra on ticket sales. What I'm gonna do here is not just tell you a simple rise and fall story, but also talk about why 3D is just unnecessary when making a feature film, especially in this day and age where the technology may be a lot more advanced, but so is the awareness of the viewer. It's the story of how far a simple gimmick can go until the average consumer would start to ask, is it really worth it to spend more than usual just to see a movie? And at no time will I be stooping to any cheap 3D tricks.
Did you say cheap 3D tricks?
So, why doesn't 3D work in movies? Let's find out. Now, in order to understand its downfall, we must begin by looking into how it became popular in the first place. I know that 3D does have a massive history, especially in the 1950s and the 1980s, but I'll just start off at the 2000s so that we can focus on its impact in the modern era. During the start of the new millennium, the relationship between 3D and movies were very minimal. For the most part, it was only specialized theaters like IMAX that would present movies specifically crafted to be in 3D. There were a few movies that would come out in 3D outside of IMAX, but they would be the kind that would require the old red and blue glasses. But then came November 10th, 2004. An animated film would step in and be the first to noticeably ring the 3D bell during the 2000 decade, and that was the Polar Express. While it was released worldwide in thousands of theaters, there were around 60 to 80 IMAXs that presented a special 3D edition of the film. And while the movie ended up making a total of $186.5 million domestically, $45 million of that came from the IMAX screenings. By doing the math, despite only appearing in around 2% of all of cinemas, 1/4 of its domestic earnings came from those 3D screenings. This would sound the alarms all over Hollywood that 3D might help gain more profitability if it can go beyond IMAX. Soon afterwards, the big name studios started to test the waters of making their own films that would also have a 3D version. The first to ever release a digital 3D film without going to IMAX was Disney with their 2005 animated feature, Chicken Little. Yes, folks, Chicken Little is the first ever film to be released in digital 3D. I'm actually serious here. I have one of the Guinness World Record books here, and it actually states with a picture from the movie stating that Chicken Little is the first digital 3D movie. So quite literally, Chicken Little will be forever in the history books. Let that sink in. In the following years, 3D would still be in its experimental phase to see what the medium can do. For the most part, it was only a handful of family films, horror movies, and concert features that were willing to also have a digital 3D version. At the same time, Disney would also use 3D as an excuse to re-release their older animated features up until 2013. Rather it be their Renaissance classics like The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and The Lion King, or some of the Pixar films like Toy Story 1 and 2, Monsters Inc., and Finding Nemo. In fact, between 2006 and 2008, some theaters would have a 3D version of The Nightmare Before Christmas. There were even plans to re-release the Star Wars trilogy along with its prequels but with a 3D upgrade, starting with The Phantom Menace in 2012. However, after the release of episode 1, the idea ended up getting scrapped due to being as disastrous as, well, The Phantom Menace. But then when 2009 rolled along, that was when 3D entered into the mainstream with a bang. More than ever, there were plenty of features that were also presented in 3D, giving it a lot more attention by being used in some of the year's biggest films. But then came one movie that would be the pinnacle moment of digital 3D. One that would be the true game changer for not just the technology, but for all movies preceding it. I'm talking about, of course, James Cameron's Avatar. During the end of 2009 and the start of 2010, it was the must-watch film of its time, with its innovative use of 3D being the main reason why people wanted to see it. The movie ended up making $760.5 million domestically and a grand worldwide total of $2.8 billion, making it the highest-grossing film of all time. Or at least, of its time. You never know if a new big movie would come in and suddenly make $3 billion. Immediately afterwards, 3D would become an important element for movies. Even critics would be judging films based on how good the 3D was. Sometimes, it didn't even matter if the movie was horrible, as long as it looks awesome with the additional effect, it will sell tickets. This is why there were several films from early 2010 that saw success for the same reason as Avatar, where the 3D was a major factor, like Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, DreamWorks' How to Train Your Dragon, and the remake of Clash of the Titans. Obviously, companies have taken note that 3D became a major selling point for audiences, and even make sure to make that highly prominent when promoting their films, like in posters and even in trailers. In fact, if you look at many of the trailers from mainstream movies between 2009 up till like 2012 maybe, you'll find that they would prominently display that it was in 3D, usually right after the title.
Final chapter in 3D. In 3D.
However, this 3D glory would be very short-lived. Right after its peak, there was already a noticeable amount of people that would rather want to watch a movie in 2D rather than in 3D. Back in 2010, there were movies where most of its earnings came from those 3D screenings. But then a year later, those numbers would become less than half, and since then, would go downhill from there. There are even statistics that show that sales in 3D tickets have significantly dropped over the years, with no sign of picking itself back up. I remember back between 2015 and 2016, maybe even in 2017 also, studios and cinemas would try to encourage people to watch their films in 3D by selling special limited edition glasses themed to major movies that were released at the time. But it still wasn't enough to bring people into the 3D experience and end up making things more pointlessly expensive for people. It has even gone to the point that Hollywood is starting to take notice and begin to abandon the technology, where there are less films produced in 3D, and theaters like IMAX are focusing more on screening their films in 2D because people are demanding to watch their movies with their own eyes instead of with plastic shaded glasses. So, as you could tell, the fame of 3D really didn't last that long after the release of Avatar. You'd think the highest grossing film ever would also be one of the most influential, but that doesn't seem to be the case. But now that we got our little history lesson on digital 3D, it's time that we ask the big question, why doesn't 3D work for movies? What is it that led to its downfall straight after the moment the technology amazed audiences? Well, there are actually several factors that would explain it, but let's start off with the most obvious, money. Every year, ticket prices would gradually increase to where they used to be on average $7 a decade ago, but now they've grown up to an estimated average of $9 each. Some can go a little lower at $8, others can jack them up to $12. But $9 is the usual price for now. And if you're watching this in the future, I wouldn't be surprised if you're looking at this $9 with envy with how affordable it was. But of course, the average consumer wouldn't just grab a ticket and check out a movie. They would usually also buy some snacks like popcorn, candy, soda, and all that junk. This is why the common moviegoer would end up spending on average $30 per person. And this doesn't even count some of the optional expenses on top of that, like the gas to go to the theater and back, going to an upgraded screening, spending time at the arcade, and buy some random merchandise. The point that I'm making here is that the movie-going experience is already expensive as it is just to go and watch one movie. At that point, is it really worth it to spend $3 more just to have the same experience but requires you to wear these glasses just so you can watch the film properly? Nobody really cares much about the 3D element anymore, which I will get to later, so it's just extra money thrown away just to get the exact same product. Not to mention that some people would end up accumulating an accidental collection of glasses. Come on, I'm sure at some point that was you. In fact, the reason why anyone would be in a 3D screening nowadays would be more for time convenience rather than to see the movie pop out of the screen. For example, I think I'll be pretty busy during the 2D 3:30 screening, but I'll be available during the 3D 5 o'clock screening. Sure, I'll have to pay $3 more, but at least the timing works better for me with that one. In this scenario, the film being in 2D or 3D is completely insignificant. As long as the timing works for the person, they will be there. So if 3D doesn't matter, wouldn't it be better to just get rid of it so people don't have to pointlessly spend that extra $3? However, if you want a better example as to how money can kill 3D, then take a look at the disastrous attempt of bringing 3D to your home. Like with the movies, 3D was once a cool thing to have in the house starting from 2011. But as the years go by, sales for 3D systems start to significantly drop to the point that manufacturers decided to ultimately end making products with 3D functions. Once again, this is due to how much customers would have to spend in order to have 3D in their homes. Allow me to show you what I mean. Let's say you bought this 3D Blu-ray that's a little pricier than your average Blu-ray. Like where they're normally $25, this one would go for $30. So now you could just pop it in and watch it in 3D, right? Wrong. In order to play a 3D Blu-ray, you gotta buy a 3D Blu-ray player, which they don't come cheap. Okay, so are you all set to watch your movie now? No, because now you gotta buy a TV that is capable of presenting 3D. Oh, and I'm sure you don't want to watch it alone, so why not buy an additional pair of special 3D glasses made for that TV? So now that we got all that covered, would people want to spend thousands of dollars and do all the labor of replacing their old TV and Blu-ray player just so they could watch this in 3D in their own homes? Is 3D worth that much? Of course not. And speaking of Blu-rays, there was a period where the biggest package a movie could offer on home media would be the 3D Blu-ray edition, or even have a 3D version bundled up with the 4K edition. However, nowadays, companies don't even sell their movies on Blu-ray 3D anymore. They would only offer them on 4K, Blu-ray, DVD, digital, and that's it, because they know 3D on home media isn't profitable. But even if Blu-ray 3Ds were a flop, I'll give them this. At least they lasted longer than HD DVDs. Now, with the financial reasons out of the way, let's get into the movies themselves and ask ourselves something important about this topic. Does 3D make movies better? Does it? Well, throughout the experience I've had with them, no, they don't. Like I said before, 3D is nothing more but a gimmick, a novelty, literally an illusion to make the movie seem bigger than it actually is. In fact, the only place that I can think where this gimmick would feel welcome by the public is at theme parks. So, in order to show what I mean, my example for this would possibly be the greatest 3D show ever made, Muppet Vision 3D, a show that can debatably be ahead of its time for how it completely satires the technology. In fact, where else do you think I got this reference from before?
So it's going to be a swell demonstration, and at no time will we be stooping to any cheap 3D tricks.
Did you say cheap 3D tricks?
Now, when people go see Muppet Vision, they don't go in to see the movie, but rather what's around the movie and what can literally come out of it. But it doesn't just stop at the screen. These attractions would also include many elements to fully enhance the experience, like real-life effects like smoke and bubbles, animatronics, live performers, and so much more. Even having the theater itself be entirely decorated to the theme of the movie in order for audiences to be fully immersed in the experience. Again, it's not the film that people want to look at, it's what's around the film that people want to see come to life. Now, let's compare that to going to see a movie in theaters. At that point, it becomes the complete opposite, where the only thing that people want to see is the movie, and that's it. No random special effects, no elaborate sets, just focus on the screen. If audiences want to be immersed in the feature, then the film would have to deliver that with strong writing, an engaging story, stunning visuals, and likable characters. The movie only has itself to carry if it wants to get the viewer's approval, and 3D doesn't do anything to add to the quality of a feature film. It doesn't enhance the writing, and debatably, they make the visuals worse because they would have to sacrifice some of the brightness in order to achieve the effect. Seriously, 3D only makes the movie slightly darker than how it is intended to be viewed. On top of that, 3D isn't forever. There will be a time when people would have no choice but to view the film in 2D. So when you do take away the 3D element from certain films, you'll realize that they're not all that good and that the 3D was just a distraction. Sure, films like Avatar and Alice in Wonderland are billion-dollar hits thanks to 3D, but without it, all you have is one film that's just blue Pocahontas, and another that's the first of Disney's live-action films that people would point to and say that the animated versions are better. However, I'm sure there are some that would beg to differ. Some would say that the downfall is not because the use of 3D itself is pointless, but rather the execution of many 3D films make it feel pointless. In a way, 3D is an art in itself, and there are prominent examples of films that have been praised for presenting it in an awe-inspiring way, like Avatar and How to Train Your Dragon. But for the most part, companies treated it like it was just an afterthought, and instead of making sure their films would look presentable in 3D while making them, they would just make the films first, then fix them up to make them look 3D afterwards in post. In a way, you could say that the big studios never really cared about 3D in the first place. And if the studios don't care about 3D, then that feeling would resonate with audiences where now they don't care about 3D, thus making it all feel pointless where no effort would be put into it. Then again, I don't think that would mean 3D would be going away forever. This rise and fall of 3D in feature films have been repeated throughout the course of cinema history. It wasn't the first time we've seen it happen, and I'm sure it won't be the last either. Hollywood and theater owners are always going to find these crazy ideas in order to lure audiences into seeing more movies without using the movies themselves. As technology evolves in such a rapid rate, it would give them an excuse to even recycle their old ideas and present them in a brand new way that we've never seen before. Maybe in the future we'll see a new form of 3D experience where it would be like the Nintendo 3DS, but on the big screen where things will pop out at you without the need of glasses. The current trend failed because nobody really cared about 3D right after Avatar. The 3D wasn't that good in most movies, and most 3D movies weren't that good, resulting in audiences to feel like the extra investment in what's already a pricey experience wasn't worth it, and take a preference for 2D. For the sake of 3D, what I'm hoping for is that this would serve as a lesson if companies want to make the technology a big deal in filmmaking. If studios would actually put effort into making great 3D movies instead of making movies that would later be converted to 3D, then maybe audiences will give it a chance, and even be willing to spend more if the experience is noticeable and worth it. We've seen how 3D can be a lot of fun and engaging at theme park attractions like Muppet Vision 3D, so that sense of joy could be emulated onto a feature film where the 3D is an integral part of the filmmaking process. So, can 3D work in movies after all? Well, no, because 3D is dead. For now.
Hey, they're hopping, their machining is going, they're flumy.
Exactly.